Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and what a delight to have in the studio with us a couple of friends. In fact, I'm going to introduce one to introduce the other, but certainly no stranger. Denny Stahl's with us today, and he's helping us with the Christians United for Israel, and he also pastors Calvary Chapel there in Grants Pass. Pastor Denny, good to see you, bud.
Great to see you, Perry.
How you doing,
Thanks.
man?
I'm doing great. How about you?
Well, great, and welcome back, our buddy.
Yes, we're so thrilled. As the Oregon State Director for Christians United for Israel, we had the privilege of having Kasim Hafeez with us again in Grants Pass last night, and we're so thrilled to share him with your audience. Kasim is the outreach coordinator for Christians United for Israel and has an amazing story to tell, an amazing personal history that has really translated into an effective voice for Israel and the Jewish people.
Well, it is. Good to see you again. Welcome back.
It's a pleasure to be back.
Good to see you. Now, his testimony is an amazing testimony, isn't it?
It truly is.
Now, you were born in England.
Yes.
And you were a confused student.
Essentially, yeah, essentially.
Been there, done that.
And you, from your birth in the UK, your ethnic background and your education left you kind of confused, right?
Yes.
What happened?
Much.
Pick it up from there.
I kind of embraced radical Islam. It gave me a sense of identity. It gave me a calling. It gave me a mission, so to speak. And radical Islam's #1 obsession is with Israel and the Jews.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of the choices I made.
All right, so, but you decided to kind of investigate a few things.
Yeah.
What'd you do?
So I came across a book called The Case for Israel, and this was when I was at my most extreme, where I had made a conscious decision that I wanted to go to a terrorist training camp. I come across this book, and I pick it up, I would say, because of arrogance more than anything. I knew I was right, so I thought if I pick this book up, it's not going to change anything. It would just show me how weak the other side's arguments are. Read this book, it makes arguments I've never heard before. The idea that the Jewish people have been in the land for thousands of years. The idea that a Palestinian state has never existed. This is contrary to everything I believe. So not willing to accept that after reading this book, I start researching. After 2 years of research, I can't validate what I believed, but I'm not willing to let it go. When you make a decision that you're ready to kill people on what you believe, you don't read one book and go, hey, got it wrong. So eventually I ended up going to Israel, and that was life-changing, to put it mildly.
But you went to Israel, and where else did you go? You went to...
So before I went to Israel, I'd been to Pakistan, and that was pivotal for me, because it was the first time I'd come face-to-face with an actual terrorist group, and that kind of really catapulted my radicalism. But I'd also been to Saudi Arabia on a religious pilgrimage.
All right, then you go to Israel.
Yeah.
And what happened there?
I spent 8 hours in security.
Welcome to Israel. Glad you're
We
here.
love you, but...
Partly my own fault, you know. So reading guidebooks, and in the UK we have the Home Office, which is similar to the State Department, which offer travel advice. And the travel advice is that Israel has security issues, to be honest. So I was very honest at security and said that I used to be anti-Semitic and anti-Israel, now I'm not so sure. So obviously they go, okay, you're going to have to take a seat. And as we're going back and forth in security, my passport was 2 months old. It had just been renewed. So I'm saying I went to Pakistan, I went to Saudi Arabia. So yeah, there were issues in that respect. Yeah. But eventually I was allowed to go into Israel. And the thing is, 8 hours is a long time, granted. But I didn't experience any racism, any discrimination, or anything like that. You know, people, in my mind, here I am in Israel, this apartheid state, and I felt none of that. And the guy from security was explaining throughout that, you know, we have a difficult situation here with security. We have to be overly careful. You know, I'm really sorry about this. When I went to Saudi Arabia, I experienced very open racism towards anyone who wasn't Arab. And sadly, the darker your skin, the more racism you were going to get. And it was very direct. And that's not even accounting for the religious discrimination in Saudi Arabia.
Wow. So you finally get in, but something happens to you, a reconsideration.
Yeah, essentially. So I'm in Jerusalem, I'm seeing all of these this diversity, Christians, Muslims, Jews, Druze, I'm talking to people and I'm still not fully willing to make that leap. Even though I'm seeing it with my own eyes, still not willing to make that leap.
Because you came in with the mindset that this is the enemy.
Yes, I was. So my trip to Israel wasn't as I left for Israel, I wasn't going to be intellectually honest. I was expecting to see the very worst of a country just to revalidate what I believed. And I'm seeing very much the opposite. I'm seeing this diversity. I'm not seeing anything which is indicative of any kind of segregation. Even talking to people, I find people are very normal, people getting on with their life. And what really stood out for me was that there was so much hatred on my side, so to speak, and it was very different from the Israeli perspective. Every Israeli I spoke to, regardless of religion or background, was pretty much of the mind that we just want peace or to be left alone. But I still wasn't willing to make that mental leap, I guess, at that point. And it was at the Western Wall where I really had a moment to kind of consider everything that I'd seen in the few days that I'd been there.
Well, fast forward to where you are today. The only thing I can say, Danny, something's going on here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this wonderful transition that took place in Kasim's life translates into an authoritative voice that really plays counter to all of the lies that are being promoted about Israel, about the state of Israel. And seeing is believing. I mean, Kasim's going to Israel and seeing firsthand and experiencing that state and its coexistence. I mean, it's amazing. I mean, the safest place, quite frankly, for a Muslim in the Middle East today is the state of Israel.
Right. Especially one that is reconsidering their belief system.
Truly, true.
Can I just stop here and go back a little bit, Kasim? What's hard for us to get our head around is that there is this belief system that it's either their way or no way.
Yeah.
We have a hard time, and I'm not even sure if the West has really put their head around this yet.
Yeah.
I mean, in some ways, is this Nazism revisited?
So essentially what I said yesterday when I spoke at Pastor Danny's church, certain streams of Islam, both within Sunni and Shia Islam, Salafism, Wahhabism, for me, are like Nazism. They're complete supremacist movements. The idea of you have to dress a particular way, you have to think a particular way, and if you don't, then you're the enemy.
Right.
And you're completely right. The West has not fathomed this at all. If they did understand this, then you wouldn't have had, for example, the catastrophic deal with Iran. Right. The idea that you have a government in 2015, 2016 that believes in their religious supremacy, that would be willing to use nuclear weapons to bring about their idea of what the end of days is very difficult to fathom in the West.
Yeah.
And when you have people saying it, I don't think we want to believe it.
Have we become appeasers in the United States?
Yes, completely. In my opinion, completely. It's not just the United States, I would say also in Europe. You have the countries that fought against the Nazis, who fought against all that was wrong, have now, I guess we live in a society where nobody wants to offend anybody,
right,
where nobody wants to call evil evil anymore. It's not the right thing to do almost, which is ludicrous. But there's the saying, all it takes for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing. And that's what the situation we're in. We're in countries that believe in freedom, democracy, and acceptance and all these things, but we're not willing to call evil what it is.
How did you come to the conclusion that what you believed in was evil and wrong?
I guess when I spent more time in Israel and then went back to the UK, I kind of put everything into perspective and thought, this is wrong. Any theology, any ideology which is calling for the murder of innocent people, men, women and children, any theology which creates victims when they're not victims, so you can justify murdering people, killing people, any theology which looks to change and conquer by force, there's an issue with that.
For you to make that change in your thinking and then come across to the point where now you are pro-Israel, I would say that's a dangerous spot for you to be in,
Yeah.
But how do you defend the fact that your background and even perhaps even your family and your heritage is on the other side of this argument? They would like to see Israel wiped off the map. They are the small Satan. The United States is the big Satan. But for you to say that Israel has a right to exist and you're out promoting that, how risky is that for you?
It's fairly risky, and that can go from that can manifest itself with anything from death threats via social media, which are normally very poorly spelled, to hostility at campuses, and all sorts of things. But ultimately, it's the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do, and look, I don't want to look back in 10, 15, 20 years' time and see a situation which has become worse. Hopefully, if people mobilize and speak up, the situation won't become worse. But say, worst case scenario, we have a scenario like Europe, where things have become very
It's out of control, isn't it?
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
I don't want to look back and go, I could have done more.
Interesting. All right, let me take a break. We'll be back. Pastor Denny Stahl's with us, and Kasim Hafeez is with us as well, and both representing Christians United for Israel. And you're the area coordinator for that, right?
The state director, yes.
State director. And what does that mean?
It means that I work with the leadership at Christians United for Israel to coordinate efforts that we make here in the state of Oregon to awaken Christians, to awaken the church, to awaken pastors and leaders to this unprecedented opportunity to stand with Israel. I mean, this is the day in which we have to do that.
This is the day. All right, we'll be right back.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Well, welcome back, and what a delight to have back in the studio with us today Pastor Denny Stahl. He's also pastor of the Calvary Chapel Church and Fellowship in Grants Pass. He's a state director for Christians United for Israel, and by the way, that's cufi.org. And bringing with him today our special guest, Kasim Hafeez, who we've had before, but we're rehearing his testimony, which is in itself so powerful and so amazing. By the way, cufi.org, Denny, is the website, and you were telling me during the break you've grown from 400 to 2.8 million?
In 10 years. Yes,
stars.
in 10 years.
So
Pastor John Hagee had this vision to bring leaders together with the idea that we were going to stand in solidarity with Israel and the Jewish people. And that resonated with those leaders. And now 10 years later, we're 2.8 million members and growing, the fastest growing and the largest organization of its kind in America.
Oh, wonderful. All right, Kasim, one of the questions that keeps popping up is that the percentage of extremists within Islam is, I don't know, they're saying maybe 8 to 10%.
Okay.
Is that right?
That's a very hopeful prediction.
Well, that's kind of where I'm going with it.
Very hopeful. Look,
Got fingers crossed, and yes.
I cannot understand why the so-called moderate Muslim isn't putting the extremists down. So their silence in some way is a condonement of what's going on.
So what you have is, firstly, the idea that it's 10%, I think, is completely ludicrous. I think it breaks into three kind of groups. I think you have the out-and-out extremists, where I would say maybe 20 to 30%, and again, that's a fairly conservative estimate. But here's the thing, even if it was 10%, the Muslim community today numbers, at a low estimate, 1.2 billion people.
Right.
10% is still a huge number.
Right.
And then you have those who are somewhere on the fence, who aren't extremists but have a huge sympathy with the extremists. Like, you have thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of people who aren't part of Hamas but have a sympathy with Hamas and will make excuses for Hamas and will justify what Hamas do. So you've got that demographic, which I would say is probably, again, these are estimates and guesses, somewhere 40 to 50%. And then you have those who are essentially just trying to get on with their lives. Mm-hmm. But the problem is the extremists are much more vocal, and it's very difficult to tackle extremism in the Muslim community. And one of the biggest obstacles to tackling extremism is essentially non-Muslim apologists for radical Islam. Whenever you have a terrorist attack, be it Brussels, be it Paris, you will have the president of the US, the prime minister of whatever country, straight away going, no, 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 Islam is a religion of peace, which is theologically incorrect. Does Islam have aspects of peace? Yes, it does, but it has a lot of aspects of war too. To make this blanket statement essentially shuts off any discussion. So you can't deal with the issues because there's almost this blanket ban on discussing it, even within the Muslim community, because you have some of the highest officials in the land making excuses before any discussions even taken place.
Absolutely fascinating. Is there a civil war among Muslims, Shiites and Sunnis? Will that preempt anything else that may be going on around the world?
It's very possible. I mean, you've had this conflict for 1400 years and this animosity which runs deeper than probably anything else within the Muslim world. And now it seems that, well, the perception within the Sunni world is that America has chosen sides in this conflict. And it's not been on the side of their historical allies, the Gulf states, the Saudi Arabia, who are Sunni countries. They've chosen to support Shia Iran. And this has completely shaken up the middle. Well, look, when you have Saudi Arabia and Israel on the same page, there is something really going on in the world today.
And Egypt.
And Egypt. Because, look, the analogy is for 1400 years, Sunni Islam has essentially been beating up on Shia Islam, and all of a sudden now Iran, which represents Shia Islam as the world's only Shia state, could quite possibly in the next few years become a nuclear-powered state. It changes everything.
Very much so. How, in your opinion, now you were part of it, you're now out of that. It's an amazing transformation because those who are part of it are in it 150%. I mean, there's a mindset that we can't get our head around.
Yeah.
And in fact, they feel compelled to become more radical, what somehow excels their position.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah, without a doubt. It's showing, and this is a bit of a broad statement, but sometimes you'll notice, especially in the UK, you have people who have converted to Islam, especially radical streams of Islam, become more radical than the people who are born into Islam. It's almost proving yourself. The more radical and more extreme you are, it's almost proving kind of your commitment to the goals and aims of radical Islam.
I mean, look at ISIS. They have recruited people across a broad demographic and a broad ideology. Their appeal via social media and the means of communication today have lured people from all different walks of life and there seems to be this I've got to outdo the last recruit with my radical nature.
Yeah, it's more than copycat.
It is. I'm going to do better. I'm going to go farther. I'm going to go deeper. I'm going to do more.
Which, by the way, taps into an American problem. Even though we have all this digital stuff, we have all these things that connect us, the #1 emotion in America is loneliness.
Yeah.
And they reach out to ISIS or Hezbollah or whatever and find identity, and they're given identity and a sense of belonging immediately.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, and that's been radical Islam's message from day one. Before ISIS ever existed, there was the idea of playing on identity. When I was growing up, for first, second generation British Pakistanis, identity was an issue. Are we British? Are we Pakistani? Are we Muslim? Because it was complicated. You know, parents had come from Pakistan, didn't really speak English. Right. We grew up speaking English as a first language. So there was this issue of identity, trying to navigate that, and then you have these extremist groups going, this is your identity. You're a Muslim first before anything else. And it gives you a neatly packaged identity, it gives you a family, it gives you a community. And you know, it's almost like a gang, so to speak.
But Muslim means monarchy, doesn't it? I mean, Muslim is everything.
To be a Muslim, so Islam means submission. It means submission to God, and Muslim comes from that word. But yeah, Muslims see their belief system as being all-encompassing.
Right. So Muslim automatically means you're Islamic, which automatically means it's your government, it's your military, it's your belief system, it's your philosophy, it's everything.
Yeah.
Okay. Pastor Denny, how how do we Christians get our head around that we have an incredible enemy out there that wants us dead?
Well, someone has control of the narrative currently, and it's sad in my estimation. You know, a professor asked his students, what are the two greatest problems we're facing today? No one had answered his question, so he finally called on a young student. The student felt embarrassed by the pressure and said, I don't know and I don't care. And the professor said, exactly. That is the problem. We don't know and we don't care. So we've allowed someone else to control the narrative. We've been here before as a nation. Thomas Jefferson, as president, authorized the building of the first naval ship in the U.S. Navy. That ship, Old Ironsides, USS Constitution, sits in the harbor in Boston. It saw the planes taking off on 9/11. They flew right over the top of that ship. Europe was busy appeasing the Barbary pirates in the Mediterranean, who were using their fast ships to plunder and to loot. And the mantra here in America was not 1 cent, millions for defense, not 1 cent for tribute. And Jefferson, against the will of his cabinet, authorized the Constitution to go and defeat the Barbary pirates. That is forever immortalized in the Marine Corps hymn, from the halls of Montezuma to the shores of Tripoli. Wow. And this idea that we have not been at war with Islam, that was the statement that President Obama made in his first speech to the Arab world at the Turkish parliament in April of 2009. It denies history. There has been this conflict from our early beginning. And what I love about Christians United for Israel and their wonderful speakers bureau, including Kasim, is the fact that we're trying to take back that narrative and educate Christians about the real threat that we're facing as America. We didn't ask for this threat, it was forced upon us. This is not Islamophobia, this is not hatred for Muslims, this is just acknowledgement of the threat and a response which is winsome and informative and hopefully motivating the Christian audience to see that there is a part for all of us to play.
Well, let me just say, our viewers and listeners, you can go to CUFI, that's ChristiansUnitedForIsrael.org. There's the website to get more information. And Kasim, thank you. I guess my last question is this. Your previous belief system wanted Christians and Jews dead because we were seen as what, Satan and the great Satan?
Essentially, yeah.
And now you're seeing that we are people of peace, people of love.
Yeah.
How do you propagate that and stay safe?
And we hope you we truly are praying that you do. We need you.
It's difficult, but honestly, with any sort of, you can't allow yourself to be intimidated. You just have to do what's right, and what's meant to happen will happen. If you start worrying about every little threat and everything that possibly could happen, then you'll never speak out. And essentially that's what the other side want to do. They want to intimidate. They do it on university campuses, they do it in communities. They intimidate to the point that people make this choice that it's better to remain silent than to speak out. I'm making the choice to speak out no matter what the outcome of that is, because it's the right thing to do.
Amazing. Amazing. It just shows you the power of transformation, you know, that can happen. Thank you. I wish I had you for about 4 shows because it's a fascinating discussion, because I don't know if we know what to do. We don't know how, and the big picture, you're looking down on it, we're appeasing this thing. Yeah. We're not fighting against it. And as I asked earlier, Danny, I hear you're saying we got to control the narrative, but we know we have an enemy. So is this a trowel and sword moment? Is this a spiritual battle moment? Is this a moment where we resist this because it is evil on steroids?
I think that's absolutely the imperative. I mean, I think there's an interesting parallel in the scriptures and in history. Mordecai came to his wonderful niece and said, you know, if you don't go before the king, God will raise someone else to save the Jewish people. But for such a time as this, you are in the perfect position, the perfect place to intervene and interrupt the enemy's plans. You know, this evil man, Naaman, was going to, he'd actually got the law passed to eradicate the Israeli people, the Jewish people, the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And Esther had the bravery, and I just compare this man's courage to that moment.
Yeah.
She was willing to go before the king to intercede. And that's why the National Prayer Day is so important. If my people would start realizing that through prayer and through our practices, through what we do, to stand with Israel, because I want to tell you, I've been in Israel and seen those Israeli soldiers. They're on the front lines of defending their own country, Perry, but they're also on the front lines defending us.
Right. That starts there. Thank you both. Good to see you again. Come back anytime.
Thank you
okay,
so much.
Danny, good to see you.
Great
and
to
we'll
see
see.
you, my friend.
Danny's one of the gentlemen praying this coming Thursday at the National Day of Prayer service. And again, if you want more information, go Christians United for Israel or CUFI.org. That's the website. And let me encourage you, go there, support them, be a part of it, and get on board. We'll be right back.